Welcome back to the Zoom into Success podcast, the bite-sized podcast teaching you everything you need to learn about entrepreneurship, where we're talking to seasoned entrepreneurs like we have on today, or talking to the everyday person that's struggling with their side hustle or business. So let's zoom into success. Can you introduce yourself?
Zoom into success. Yo, you
Proper cheesy.
smashed
That's it's
it.
a
Nah, you
great
smashed
name.
it,
We
man.
want it. It's on Zoom. We're talking about how people can become successful. That's the whole point of the podcast.
It makes
Go
so
on.
much sense. It makes so much sense, bro. Yeah, so, my name's Ibrahim Bramiah. It's always when people say like introduce yourself, I'm like, I'm talking about myself. What the hell?
Yeah.
But well, I'm a property investor, a public speaker. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I love speaking to people. I've got a coaching business myself because just based on my background, my history, kind of where I've come from, the difficulties I faced. I just love being able to sort of pass that knowledge onto others. I genuinely get fulfillment from helping other people sort of grow. So, this idea of Zoom into success. If anyone's able to sort of walk away from this podcast and take something that they're able to implement in their lives and their businesses, then I love it, man.
That's the whole point. We want them to walk away with value, and that's why the podcast is open to anyone, right? We talk to seasoned entrepreneurs. We'll talk to the everyday person that's got struggles with their business. We'll try and give them advice, or try and connect them with people to sort of help move people along, and also anyone listening can get value from the conversations that's happening here. So look, I love you. I love the journey that you've been going on. Obviously, we've been connected a little while now, and I think everyone that goes into coaching has a reason to go into coaching that isn't just purely financial based. It's having a sort of a connection to help people succeed, right? And that's the whole point of it, is that their success is it's our fame, right? Or their fame is our success, whatever the way it is, right? The whole point is that we want all of these people to do extremely well, and that's the background. So talk to me. So you're in property. You've been doing property for a long time. What was the reason that you went into the property market initially, right? Because it's one of those things that I think people tend to sometimes shy away from. Although obviously there's a lot of money to be made in the property market.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I've probably a lot of people that come into property is, maybe they're working a corporate job. They want to do something on the side. They want to quit their jobs. They don't like how much money they're making, whatever it might be. So, they see property as a vehicle to escape that, which it is. For me, I actually just went down the corporate route. I went to uni in '08, doing business, very generic, start thinking to myself, like, mate, if you don't, I'm listening to stories thinking, hang on, I could do 3 years of this and I'm going to come out and there's no jobs guaranteed. So I said,
Yeah.
you know what, let me drop out of uni. But I've always been connected to property. Like growing up in Nigeria, property was definitely connected to wealth. You growing up in abject poverty, which I was, and I'll go around the corner, I see these massive houses. I see, I always have this image of when I was just walking to the shop one day and I saw this guy in his car, and obviously he's pressed the button from the car and the gates opened. And like, you don't understand how was that image imprinted on my mind. I said, do you know how rich you have to be not to step out your car and open a gate? Like that was the image I had at the time, right? It was crazy. And then I saw the house massive, and that just stuck with me. So I've just always connected property and wealth. So when I dropped out of uni, but even while at uni, before uni, you're watching homes under the hammer, all this sort of thing. So I just wanted to get into property. So I just went, printed out CVs, no experience, and just applied to the high street agents. And, I was fortunate enough to actually get a job with one of them. And then it's just kind of progressed from there, did that. And then I actually went away from property, went into insurance, started my own brokerage. That business fell, went into depression. And then just kind of, it's really funny because you go into entrepreneurship because you feel like this is going to give me the freedom I want. And then you fail and then you say, actually, well, the only way I'm going to get my freedom and security is to actually just go and get a 9 to 5. Yeah, I guarantee my income. And then
Yeah.
I went back to corporate, went to work for an investment firm, a property investment firm particularly, and realized actually I can't do this. Right
It's not for
after,
you.
yeah, this is not. Hey, the money was great, all of that, but something happened. My mom went into intensive care with COVID. I needed to take time off, and the sentiment was just like your clients need you. It was just like, did you hear what I just said? Like I'm the eldest son, I'm African. It's like a tradition. Like, I've got to look after my siblings. I've got all these calls coming in from Africa, people trying to find out, and I had to process how I was feeling myself. So at the time, my partner was pregnant. So I just start, you start thinking, well, what happens if that was my daughter? These people don't care. So I don't want to be in the position when that situation does happen and I'm having to tell them to go and get stuffed because of course I'm going to go and be with my daughter, but then I'm going to lose,
The
what's
income.
bringing in the income to be able to actually provide for family. So I said, okay, you know what? You've got to go create your own thing, right? So that's when I then left corporate finally. But I think there's the difference in the motivations, right? The first time was just, you know what, I think I can do this insurance thing better. I think I can make a whole bunch of money. Let's go and do it. The second time was, I never want to be in this situation again. I've got a family coming up. I want to be able to provide them with future security and I want the freedom and autonomy to be able to make my own decisions. And guess what? That succeeded. Right?
Well,
So
exactly, and I think you touched on quite an interesting point around, people go into entrepreneurship to get freedom, and I think that's what a lot of people think initially, but you actually lose all of your freedom when you're building a business, right? Because it's the countless hours. Look, we're here on a Saturday morning, sitting down talking about business, right? I mean, when you could be sort of out enjoying it with family and friends, right? I mean, entrepreneurship is you have to be built a certain way to get into the life of entrepreneurship, and it comes down from a deep need to succeed, right? I mean,
that's
around
the name
whether
of my podcast, by the way.
I
The
know
need to.
exactly a nice little plug there. But like it comes from that deep sense of, we want the autonomy, we want to build something where we can live life on our own terms, and obviously everyone sort of pictures like sitting on a beach or whatever, and maybe that's the long-term goal, but please just don't go into entrepreneurship thinking that you get freedom for a while, right? I mean, it's going to take several years of building hard graft, especially usually alongside a 9 to 5, right? I mean, it's interesting to hear that you were doing insurance, you started your own brokerage, you had those fails, and sort of that picked you back up and got back into it. What was probably the thing for you that allowed you, do you think, to sort of get back on your feet and get back into starting another business after your first one failed? Because often what I see, obviously, we deal with a lot of people that have been scammed, and obviously it's an awful thing that happens with people. They pay for coaching or mentoring and it ends up being complete mis-selling, or they just disappear with the money, and it turns people off from the idea of entrepreneurship. Like from your own experience where you've gone into business, although obviously not scammed, but like you've had a business that's failed, you've lost out on a lot of money. What was the thing that allowed you to pick yourself back up and say, you know what, actually I want to go again?
It's the reason why. And I know this is like generic motivational, but I can only talk from my story. Like I said, I started
Yeah,
the
of
first one.
course.
That failed, because the intention going into it was purely monetary, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people, that's a big enough motivation for them. Now that I understand myself more, like it just isn't. I've always been driven by the things that I'm able to accomplish with money, right? And I think just that, like, just imagine, your mom is in intensive care, like literally, she's in a coma. The only thing keeping her alive is a ventilator, right? And you are the top performer in your company. You're making these people millions of pounds, and you always working hard, 70 to 80 plus hours every single week. And this is during COVID, so this isn't like, you're pulling on. This is during COVID. I'm not one to take time off, right? And I'm saying, hey, this is what's happened with my mom, and everyone's already aware. It wasn't like it happened that day, and
Yeah.
that day I said, hey, I've got. Do you know what I'm saying? You're already aware what's happened, and now I'm saying, hey, you know what? I've got to deal with this, right? I need to. And when you made me feel this small for making that request, I think it was just the realization of, when people say it's a broken system. What I've come to realize is the system is not broken, right? The system is just not designed for you. The system is designed to keep the wheel turning for the system. It's
Yeah.
working perfectly fine, right? And if you die, right, you just get removed. That's a spoke. A new one comes and boom, and the wheel keeps on turning. It's not designed for you. So what do you mean it's broken? It doesn't work for you because it's not designed to work for you. So I realized, and I said, okay, well, if I want something different in my life from what I currently have, then I'm gonna have to go and create that, right? And listen, entrepreneurship is not the only way. People can go and look for jobs, maybe pays a little bit less, maybe less demanding, and they don't have to work weekends and they have to have autonomy. All of that. I've never been shy of hard work, so I didn't really care about that. I didn't. I still wanted the money, right? But I was like, I need autonomy. I need to be able to say, for example, like you said, we're doing this podcast now. We're going to be driving, me and Mrs. my daughter. We're going to be driving to my mom's house in Cambridge after this. I've got the autonomy to do that. I don't have to be somewhere today. I can, okay, cool, like whatever. Like that's what's important to me. And I think, because my partner was pregnant at the time, she was already saying to me before all these things happened, like, what sort of life is this? Like, I'm working crazy hours, bro. Like, I'm putting it in. And even when I come back home, the work carries on, right? Because we're dealing with some of the wealthiest people in the world, like, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Australia, all of
Mm.
these international clients, Singapore, like this. When these people want you, they want you, right? And to be a top performer, that's just what it took. So for me, it was just an understanding of, for me to create the life that I want for my family. I didn't grow up with my dad. So to be able to be there for my daughter before she was born, before we were pregnant, this is something that I'd always held, in high value. Like, I want to be there for my family. I want to be able to experience, and you know what I'm saying? Like, there's none of that lack in that respect, right? So I start realizing, well, actually, I'm not going to be able to achieve this there. The way I justified it to my missus at the time was, well, how else are we going to make the sort of money we're making? Like, what we're talking about here, right? Like, I'm the provider, right? Like, this is, can you not see what we're making? But once that experience kicks in and you start saying, okay, well, I thought this was secure, but is it really though? Right? Is it secure against what I want? And that drive of understanding what isn't actually secure, the life that I want for my family, I'm not going to be able to achieve that doing this. Well, what's the alternative? Right? How else can I make the same sort of money and have the autonomy? And entrepreneurship has always been in me anyway. I think I was deluded when that situation happened because I fell into a bit of depression. So that just kind of threw me. But the reality is, it's always kind of been in me. I've always wanted autonomy. I've never really wanted to work for someone, right? So that's why my career has been really varied in terms of all the jobs that I've done.
Jumping
Because I'm like,
around,
nah,
yeah.
I'm done with this. Yeah, 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 yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of like having golden handcuffs though, because I've see the, you get paid a high salary, and just because you get paid more, they seem to expect, obviously they expect
Your
more of you.
life.
But like, I mean, it means that you have to start working crazy hours. And I mean, I've worked in consulting, so I definitely know, I know the background of what you're talking about, working, weekends, long evenings, and what sort of life is it to earn all this money and literally just go to work and come home? Like, to be honest, I've often thought about, you know, just going for a quieter life, moving out to the West Country, I don't know, work in the local pub and just live on the beach and work a few days a week. I mean, look, that you probably have a better quality of life than you do if you work in the city, working all hours. But we're always chasing that money, and I think what's quite interesting is you mentioned it, right, is what is your why? Like, what are you working towards? Like, for me personally, it's, being able to live a life of abundance, never having to struggle, but also being able to sort of provide that to my family, not just my wife and my son, but obviously the rest of my family as well, right? It's not driven by, I want this material wealth where I can be wearing watches and Lamborghinis and all these different types of things, right? I think it comes from, like, what is your why? Because that will determine the things that you can actually look into to get going. And obviously for you, that was starting a property business. You can be there with your children, you can be there with your wife, you can sort of work the hours that you want, you can have the autonomy, you can build wealth in a way that is going to work for you. So obviously that's what you went into. What was the reason you decided to do sort of, it's Airbnb, right? What was the reason that you went down the Airbnb route in property rather than some of the other models like deal sourcing, HMOs, all this other type of stuff?
Brilliant. Yeah, great, great, great question, because there's so many different strategies. And it's actually funny you spoke about the different, property courses and all these type of things and people getting scammed. And I didn't get scammed. I didn't get scammed.
Mm.
But so I'm leaving a high paying job, right? I've invested in mentorship, right? And also before I start to build my business, bills have got to get paid every month.
Yeah, the
That's it,
bills
right?
don't stop. They
The
they
bills
don't
don't
stop.
stop. Yeah. The bills don't stop. So I'm in this industry now, and kind of like my background, homelessness, all of that sort of stuff, right? Before. So my credit's shot. So I'm looking at this strategy. I'm looking at the deal package, and I thought, okay, cool. This is actually very natural for me because I've been working at a property investment firm anyway. So essentially, it's deal packaging scaled down, but it is deal packaging, right? So the skill set was already there. Speak with investors,
Yeah.
find investment opportunities, all of that sort of stuff. So I could have gone down that route. But I looked at it as, okay, cool. Until you've built up a pipeline, which again, I'm not trying to deter anyone from that, because again, it depends on what your goal is, your strategy. Until you've built up that pipeline, you have to sell a deal and then the month is back to zero. Then we've got to start again. Then you got to find another deal to sell, right? And then it's back to zero. Then you got to find another deal to sell. So I said, okay, cool. And then I looked at this, the Airbnb space. I said, okay, cool. Well, this looks good. But then, you're talking about putting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 grand into one deal.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, for a new starter, that's gonna take like 8 months to break even before you then start seeing a profit. I need money today. So I just like literally I went through this process. I said, okay, cool. Like, this doesn't make sense though. Surely a lot of people can't do this, but a lot of people are in this industry. So how are these people who've got like 100+ units? Like, how much money? This has got to be like a venture capital sort of setup. Do you know what I'm saying? Because this is like 6, 7, 8 grand per product. What sort of startup is this? So I said, okay, cool. I said, like, how could I do things differently? Like, what? Because I've been in property for about 8, 9, 10 years at this point. Like, what can I draw from my experience? So I went back to the estate agency days and I said, well, we didn't rent properties from landlords. We just managed it for landlords, and then we got paid for the services that we're offering. Right? So why can't we do that with this as well? So I said, okay, cool. Let me look into this. So I researched and I realized all the largest companies. So pretty much anyone that's got like 30+ units, 100 units, 1,000 units, they're all doing management. So I'm like, well, why is no one teaching this stuff then?
Yeah.
Like, everyone's teaching rent to rent, rent to rent, rent to rent. And bear in mind, I've been at this. So I went to a coaching company to get mentorship because of my property experience for years. I've done high level property, in all honesty. They kind of saw that straight away. And they actually brought me into the organization. So I started doing consulting for them, and I was also mentoring within their academy, funny enough. But I'm seeing a lot of people coming through. This is me just being very, very frank on this podcast now, who look like me. 85% of these people coming to these things are black, right? And I'm like, but like, you lot are spending your hard-earned money, and the results at the end of it, it's not, the maths ain't adding up, right? And that pulled at me differently. I'm just being very, very frank, right? It just pulled at me differently. So I said, like, this ain't right, because these people are coming in, they're making investments up front, and now they're struggling to actually, invest in deals. They haven't got any more money to invest in deals. But you're selling this rent to rent option because, for you to say you're going to make £1,000 per property sounds better to say you're going to make £500 per property, right? So it's a lot easier to sell that when you're charging someone 6, 8, 10 grand. It's a lot easier to say you're going to get a grand per property because they're thinking they're going to get the money back quicker,
Yeah.
right? So from a marketing standpoint, I understood that. But for me, from a practical standpoint, I'm like, well, you've been here for a year now. You haven't got a deal. So that may sound better, but actually, if you just done the management and you offer the landlord an increase in the revenue, which is actually going to solve the problem that they've got right now, then you could have been on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties, and you would actually start making profit. So that was something that really kind of strung at me. That definitely played a factor in me going down the Airbnb route for sure. Like I said, the deal packaging was a natural progression for me. But I said,
Yeah.
what, I'm gonna go and build this Airbnb business. This isn't really just about me anymore. Of course, it was about me. I needed to make money for my family and build a business, but it was also about, well, let me go out there and do it. I'll be the case study, and then once I've done this, then I can actually show people how they can do this for themselves as well.
Yeah. I think that's like extremely important, right? I mean, people have to see that you can do it yourself. I think the problem where a lot of the scams come in is people are not doing it themselves and pushing something else, and it's pointless, right? And I think all the strategies can be good for certain individuals, right? I think the problem with the way that a lot of these things are sold is the lack of transparency. Sometimes it's like, yeah, great, I'm going to sell you a get rich quick scheme type thing, right? I'm going to tell you that you can make all this money, but in reality, you've not got anyone actually telling you what the downside of that is. I appreciate people are trying to get sales, and to be honest, it's partly why we built our business, right? We're not, the whole point of us is that we're not going to pressure people into sales that they're not ready to do. We want people to have transparency. They look through different listings and stuff, because the one of the worst things that I hate with sales in the online world is everything is through a funnel. Like, I completely get people need to be taken through a sales process, but if I want to know what you're offering me, why do I have to read through some long old ClickFunnels page to just get to the bottom to find out part of the information. Like I get the reason people do it. I just absolutely hate it because especially if you're on the fence, right? And maybe this is why they do it because they want you to get on sales calls. But if you're on the fence, you just want to know what's going on. Just give me a straight answer, dude. Like I'll DM you and be like, oh, are you offering one-to-one mentoring? Like what's covered in the mentorship? And then like straight back, it's like, yeah, we do mentorship, but what are you after? And it's like start taking you straight into something. Like just give me a straight answer, dude. Like it's one of those
So
things,
like,
right?
do you want me to be 100% frank with you? But you probably got the idea I'm always just 100% honest now, right? But I use the same tactics.
Yeah, I mean, it works, right? I mean, people do the sales, and I think that's why we sit there in the middle now. That for the people, because there's an audience of people that need to be sold to. There's also an audience of people that just want to have that transparency. It's the reason like Airbnb's there, right? I mean, it's the reason that marketplaces exist today is so that we can broker those relationships between people that just want a bit more information. They want the
Do you know
transparency.
what it is? Do you know what it is? I think for me, the reason why I believe in marketing, not lying. There's people who just lie in the marketing
Yeah.
and they try to like deceive you.
Yeah.
That's just wrong, right? But I believe in marketing to convert. So I was at Tony Robbins' event last year in August, Unleash the Power
Yeah,
Within,
I
right?
saw that. That was meant to be a fantastic event, actually.
It was incredible. It was really, really good. And what's his name? Dean Graziosi came on as well, right? And he was talking about marketing. He's obviously a really, really good marketer. And he says, sell them what they want and give them what they need, right? And the results from my students, I've got someone who I'm working with now from a marketing standpoint, and he said, "Oh, let me speak to the students. I want to find out." Before he actually decided to work with me, he did that once he'd seen what my students were saying about me, right? And that's for me in terms of delivering, it's just 100%. Because I feel if you've given me your hard-earned money, like, I've got to get your results. Do you know what I mean? That's the way that I see it. But when I say sell them what they want, is no one see what we just said then about what it really takes to be an entrepreneur. You and I know that, bro. But trust me, someone who's starting, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They're like, my life's already hell at work. I'm already doing, 8, 9, 10 hours at work. I'm not trying to hear you not tell it. This is meant to be a side hustle. It's just a
Yeah.
little something just to. And I'm like, the idea of it is preposterous because you want to make more money in your side hustle than you do in your full-time job, but you want to work less on your side hustle.
Yeah, it can be crazy, and I'll be honest. Like a lot of the sales calls that I have, like a lot of the questions that I ask initially is, look, if somebody doesn't want to speak to me on a sales call on a Saturday, don't start a side hustle, because if you're not willing to take 15-minute phone call, dude, like why are you trying to start a side hustle? And for everyone that's obviously gonna be listening, right? I mean, if you're not willing to put time out outside of your 9 to 5, because that is realistically the only time you're going to have a chance to build wealth in entrepreneurship or a side hustle, it's outside of work. If you're not willing to give up, whether it's going to the pub or jumping on Xbox or going out for dinner with your missus, right? You're not willing to give some of those things up in the short term. Don't think about the long term rewards, right? Because you're just not going to achieve it. So
Sacrifice. You must.
yeah,
There's got to be a sacrifice somewhere. You can't. I was speaking to a student yesterday, and it was kind of talking about I know myself, and yeah, I'll end up kind of giving up at some point. I had to go back to the goals that were written down on what you want to achieve. Like you want to give your mom a bit of freedom. Like you want to sort of be the leader in your family because right now, even though he's the youngest, his older brother unfortunately comes from like a working class background, all of this. And
yeah,
it's like a typical, stereotypical stories you'd hear. My missus come from working class background, but she doesn't have this kind of viewpoint. But unfortunately, he just does, right? But I was saying to him, that's who you were. To become the person who's going to achieve these goals that you want, then you need to become a different person, right? You need to become the person who does follow up, the person who, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. Now, that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to hold you accountable and push you and guide you through that process. But like this, you can't keep looking at yourself as that person. Like you have to be a new
you got to
person,
create
right?
a new person. You got to be consistent, right? It all comes down to consistency. And obviously that's the most important thing with business and entrepreneurship. Like you could have no skills and you could learn everything, right? But the thing that you can't really learn is consistency. That is like a self-driven inner belief that you have to just do. that's not really something you can learn. Like you can learn property, you can learn Amazon, you can learn to trade, you can learn all these different side hustles. But if you're not gonna show up every day, forget about it. You
Yeah.
know,
I
forget
think
about it.
you can grow there. I think it's not something that you can just say, okay, yeah, I'm going to be consistent now. But I think over time, like with life lessons, with, trial and error, you've been doing the same thing over and over again. The results are still not coming. Over at some point, you're going to be like, I've just got to try something else. Like, do you know what I'm saying? What I'm doing is not working.
It's that inner belief that keeps you going, and having that North Star, I think, is extremely important. So, moving on from property, you also run a podcast, right? You've got your own podcast. And I think a lot of people wanting to get into podcasting, starting podcasts. I think I see something that, like, every day there's more and more podcasts starting than there was yesterday, right? So, in terms of starting a podcast, what are some of the things that some of the lessons that you took into starting your podcast and getting going?
Well, I heard this crazy statistic and I said, I'm going to be part of the 1%. Like, bro, it is insane. Something crazy. Like, if you've got, I don't want to butcher the numbers, but either way, the numbers are crazy. Like, if you've released 20 episodes, you're part of the top, I think it's 5%. Like,
20
the
episodes
people,
is not a lot, is it? It's not a lot.
I said, no, I said, I'm going to be a 1%er. Right?
Yeah.
To be 1% is something like, I think it's like 22 or 25 or something crazy like that. To be part of the 1%
That's not.
of podcasters.
It's nuts. You look at was it Mr. Beast on YouTube, and like one of the things that he said in the past was, "Don't talk to me until you've done 100 YouTube videos."
Yeah,
The same thing with podcasts, right? Don't be like you post what unless you've got a huge following already, right? Unless you've got a huge following, you can market it to. But like, just do the podcast because you're passionate about something. Like for me, I do. Obviously, we've got this podcast now that's just launching as well as the one in the studio. The point of that for me is that I just want I get value from it. Like I'm talking to you, I'm getting value personally about your journey, how I can implement these things and take that away in my life. Like honestly, selfishly, if you're going to start a podcast, do it for you selfishly.
100%. I do agree with that. It's a lot of value that you get from podcasts. So, for example, just for me, getting to, so if you think about from a networking standpoint,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
connected with people online, but then there's I've got you in my studio, we're chatting, and then we're gonna grab a drink afterwards or grab some lunch. And you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna get it's like, yo, do you know what I'm saying? Like we're getting into each other's pockets, right? So that's one thing. But also for me, again, it goes to why did I start it? So again, bro, like it goes back to my background, my story, where I come from. And I remember, being homeless and just it's funny because I've always known, and I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet, by the way. So this isn't like, oh, I've quit it, I'm done, right? I'm nowhere near, right? But I've always known that, there's great things that I'm going to achieve in life. I've always had that confidence. But even when I'm homeless in the streets, I had that belief. But I saw the way people used to look at me, right? And that used to hurt me more because I'm like, you're looking at me like I'm down and out, right? And I know the way you see me as nothing, right? And that I remember that feeling, all right? And I want people, I had that confidence. I think that just come from my background, when you're growing up in Nigeria, you're just kind of being poor, you're at the bottom. You can only see like it's cool, like something is gonna come, like something's gonna be better. And I think maybe for me as well, because my mom was already in the UK, so maybe that visualization of, okay, you know what, one day I'm gonna go to the UK and John said everything's gonna be all right. Maybe there was that as well. But I just always had that. And it wasn't actually just me, all my cousins who I grew up with. So like my auntie was basically like my mom and my dad because I grew up with them. All of us in that family, we had this. So maybe something that they cultivated, even though we didn't have much. So for me, I always had that. But I know that there was people in the streets with me who did not have that. So like the Need to Succeed podcast where I bring on successful entrepreneurs and we have conversations. We don't, we speak about their journeys because I know from one thing is everyone's got a journey. And sometimes it's difficult, if you're at the bottom and you're looking at all these people on Instagram and they're saying they've got these properties, they've got these businesses and all of that. And you're thinking, "Oh, it's so easy for them. How am I ever gonna get there?" So in my podcast, we literally talk about how who were you at 5 and then 10, what were you like in school, what happened in life, because once you go down that you know minute details, then you start to find out about the struggles that people went through, about the bullying they went through, and about how they were treated in school and the difficulties they had to overcome. And now you're sitting there at home thinking, Shit, I'm going through that right now. But look at where they are. Because in the introduction, I give them a really big introduction as to how successful these people are. So you know they're really successful. But when you start hearing the stories, it starts to give you like a, oh wow, okay, well, maybe there's still some hope.
Yeah,
Do you know?
I think sometimes people fall into the trap of believing everything or thinking that everything on Instagram is what their life is, and it's not. I mean, Instagram is like a portion of somebody's day. I mean, if you see somebody getting in a nice car, they're not sat in a nice car the whole time. They're probably sat at home working the whole time, or you know, if they're on a beach in the Maldives for 2 weeks, they've not been there the whole year, have they? They've worked for it, and I think sometimes people fall into the trap of thinking, well, it's easy if somebody's got it on Instagram, right? I mean, that's what we want. I mean, you don't see the years of work that went into that. So I often say to people like, look, Instagram's great, use it as inspiration, but don't sort of just copy or go with what's on
Man,
Instagram because it's not the full story.
expect if you try to follow the standards of what you see on Instagram,
Oh,
you will never.
you're going to constantly look down on yourself. You've got 18-year-olds on Instagram that are driving Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, all this stuff online, and you're like, dude, I'm 25. Why haven't I done that? Like, people start to, you look down on yourself and don't get hung up on what other people are achieving. Have this tunnel vision of what you want to achieve, set your goals and start to work towards them because, every step forward is the route to go. I wouldn't worry too much about what other people are achieving. So, look, the last question before we wrap up is we've started to ask everyone is if you were to lose everything today, so all the properties that you've built up, all the connections, what would be what would day one, what would be what you would do? Because you've got all the knowledge still. What would you do to get back to where you are?
Oh, I love this question. So simple. So simple. The first one I'm going to decide is, first of all, decide, okay, what business strategy do I actually want to adopt? And I think for me, naturally, it's going to be property again because, what's
Well, you
the
have got the
quickest.
knowledge, right? You got the knowledge.
Exactly, exactly. You know what I mean? Like the path of least resistance, right? So property, okay, cool. So we're going to do property. And then I'm just going to go to the networking events near me. For me, not property networking events. And this is where people get it really, really incorrect when it comes to property. I always just think about this concept. I was at one of my networking events actually on Thursday, and I was speaking to this lady who's doing really, really well. She owns a social media marketing agency, and she's doing incredible well within our networking group. And I said, yeah, the reason why is because you're not in a marketing networking environment where everyone is doing the same thing. Everyone is selling social media marketing services. Everyone is selling digital marketing services. So it's like, well, who are you selling to? Right. So when it comes to networking, I always say to people, you have to decide why you're going to that networking event. So I'm not saying don't ever go to property networking events. I also go to property networking events. But if I'm looking for something specific, if I'm looking to build a team, right, then I will go there because the people I'm looking for are likely to be there. But if I'm looking for investors, if I'm looking for landlords, right, I'm not going to property networking event because everyone there is looking for the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Right.
You've got to get that diversification. You've got to connect with as many different people as you possibly can to get to where you want to be.
100%. So for me, I'll go networking. I'll do business networking events. I will build relationships with as many people as possible, and then effectively, I would find deals for these people. So it would either be again because I know the knowledge I have. So I'm just going to start the business which I've already started. But if I'm honest, the easiest business for me to start would actually be the deal sourcing, right? For me, because of my background, because of my expertise. The reason I went down the service accommodation route was for a very specific reason. I wanted to, first of all, yes, build a business, but I also wanted to help people within that space to say, well, actually, there's a different way. If you're coming from a position where maybe you haven't got any money, you haven't got any credit, there's no one there who's willing to be a guarantor for you, then you can actually still make it. But if I was just starting, from scratch again, I will go down the deal packaging route. I'll build up my list of investors. I'll tell them exactly the sort of service I can offer for them, help them build a portfolio, show them everything that they need that they don't even know, how to structure, their businesses, their finances to be able to get property deals. All of a sudden, I add that value to them, and then I actually also secure the property deals for them, and then obviously I get paid for the services that I've
Yeah.
offered. That's
Well,
exactly what I
I,
do.
I, I think like the valuable point there is like day one, get networking. And I mean, I think everyone can take that away and say, look, whatever business you're going into, get networking. There you go. There's the first step from like obviously somebody that's doing it day in, day out. Get networking. It's the most important thing. So thank you.
So
so much for coming on, Ibrahim. It's been a great chat. I think there's been
Thanks for
lots
having
of
me, man.
value for everyone here. So hopefully all of you can take some of these lessons away and zoom into success.